Hello, my name is Michelle Stiebuckles, and I'm an English coordinator with Laying the Foundation, a division of National Math and Science. The Common Core State Standards lay out a vision of what it means to be a literate person in the 21st century. And to this end, they dictate that students must grapple with very complex texts across their subject matters. To realize this vision, teachers in English language arts, science, and social studies must work together as a team in order to promote literacy across their disciplines. The objective of this webcast is to investigate the commonalities and differences between ELA and literacy standards and explore the implications of these standards. In order to accurately measure how well students are mastering literacy standards, PARCC will incorporate texts from across the discipline as part of its assessment. Accordingly, in model content frameworks for grades 3 through 5, some texts will involve reading from across the disciplines. The K-5 standards include expectations for reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language applicable to a range of subjects, including but not limited to ELA. The Common Core standards require that instruction in reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language become a shared responsibility within the school. The standards for grades 6 through 12 include specific standards for ELA and separate but closely related literacy standards for history and social studies, science, and technical subjects. This dual set of standards reflects the primary role ELA teachers have in developing students' literacy skills, while acknowledging that teachers in other disciplines play a critical role in developing student literacy. History and social studies, science, and technical subject teachers are encouraged to review the model content frameworks collaboratively with ELA teachers to coordinate literacy instruction, especially in the key areas of reading and writing. The standards promote this interdisciplinary approach to literacy because there's extensive research establishing the need for college and career-ready students to be proficient in reading complex informational text independently in a variety of content areas. Most of the required reading in college and workforce training programs is challenging in content, and students will receive little to no help reading complex texts once they leave their high schools. One talking point that emerged during the first PARCC ELC meeting is that Common Core state standards promote a culture of literacy within a school campus. The message to stakeholders is that all teachers should directly teach the language of their discipline to help develop student literacy, and that science and social studies teachers should include reading of complex texts apart from their textbooks as part of their regular classroom practice. The activity I'm about to model is designed to help familiarize stakeholders such as teachers with the similarities and differences between the ELA standards and the literacy standards in the history and social studies and science and technical subject standards. Beginning on page 18 of your PARCC materials, you'll see charts that align the reading informational text standards for grades 9 and 10 and the reading standards for literacy in history and social studies. Begin by having participants identify and highlight wording common across the content areas for the first three standards. For example, on the first standards, we highlight the common words cite textual evidence, and support analysis. In the second standard, we're going to highlight determine a central idea and summary. In the third standard, we're going to look at the phrase analyze and series of ideas and events. In the fourth standard, we would want to highlight the phrase determine the meaning of words and phrases. Here, you can see the common words identified in the first 5 standards. You might point out to your audience that the commonalities are frequently skill-based. For example, both sets of standards require that students find central ideas in a text, or analyze, or follow a series of events. After participants complete the similarities for all 10 standards, the next part of the activity asks participants to highlight the differences. For example, when considering the first standard, Social studies and history teachers will need to target primary and secondary sources, as well as date and origin of the information. According to the second standard, social studies and history teachers will need to address primary and secondary sources, as well as key events or ideas developing over the course of the text. Moving to the third standard, teachers will highlight the idea that students need to determine whether earlier events caused later ones or simply preceded them, and so forth. Here's an example of a completed chart in which the similarities and differences between the ELA standards and the history and social studies standards are identified. As you might expect, the key differences tend to be content-specific. The literacy skills, summarize, identify, analyze, and cite, are the same across disciplines. The activity is repeated using the ELA standards and the science and technical subjects literary standards found on pages 20 through 21 in the manuals. Instead of having participants highlight the similarities between the documents, we ask them to highlight the differences as they appear in the science and technical subjects column. For example, for the first standard, we see that both ELA and science require students to cite textual evidence. To identify the differences between the standards, we would highlight the difference attending to precise details of explanations or descriptions. Here's a completed document with the differences between ELA and science literacy standards highlighted. When discussing the history and social studies and science and technical subjects literacy standards with your audiences, you'll want to consider the following message points: the implications of content-specific language for college and career readiness for all students, the shifts in thinking that teachers and other educational professionals need to make when considering disciplinary literacy, and the implications for teaching across the curriculum on curriculum planning, scheduling, teacher planning, training, etc. You'll also want to note that PARCC may assess ELA standards and/or literacy standards on the ELA portion of the assessment. These points and others were explored during the discussion and exchange of ideas shared during the sessions themselves. While we cannot recreate that exchange here, this video will give you a starting point to help promote similar discussions in your own groups. The material for this activity can be found on the PARCC portal at parcltftraining.org. If you have any questions about the activity or the discussion points, please feel free to contact any member of the ELA team, and our contact information can be found on the LTF website listed here on your screen. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to working with you during the upcoming webinars and the face-to-face meeting in February.